Welcome, everyone. I'm Kim Bremmer, your host today for another edition of BoviNews, keeping you up to date on the cattle industry's latest in technology, management, genetics, and more. Today, we're talking about genomic technology, which has been available to dairy producers for many years. Each year, more and more producers take advantage of genomic tests to speed the genetic progress of their herds. As more producers use genomics, more information is available to use to enhance the accuracy of genomic tests and develop new genomic products. On today's webinar, you'll hear from 3 experts who will provide an update on new technologies and opportunities available to dairy producers through the use of genomics. Dr. J.R. Tait is the Director of Genetics Product Development with NEOGEN. Dr. Tait started his career as a research scientist at Iowa State University, managing a beef cattle selection project. Prior to joining NEOGEN, J.R. worked at the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center in Clay Center, Nebraska. Now, Dr. Tait coordinates continued development of the GeneSeq Genomic Profiler portfolio of SNP arrays for a wide range of species. Furthermore, he's involved in the conversion of genomic data to information for selection and breeding decisions on traits of economic importance through the iGenity line of products for commercial cattle. Welcome, Dr. Tait.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate the chance to speak to everybody through the BoviNews network program. Today, I'm going to visit with you a little bit about the overview of dairy heifer genomic testing, and specifically what we have in the iGenity Select Genomics program. I'll start with an overview of why a producer would want to do genomics testing, a brief overview and reminder about the choice of sires that you use are very important, but there's also a lot of Mendelian sampling that occurs, and that's very important for consideration and how genomics can really help understand that inheritance. A little brief overview about how sample collection is important for the staff to be able to implement genomics effectively. And then an overview of demonstration of how producers want to make sure that they can capture that genetic potential in the animals that they retain within their herds. A brief overview about Mendelian inheritance. Here I have a graphic that shows how biology is really indicating variability. A reminder to everybody that cattle have 30 pairs of chromosomes. They get 1 chromosome from their sire and 1 set of chromosomes from their dam. So there's 30 chromosomes from each of those. In this slide, I have a graphic that represents the bull, and you can see 30 chromosomes going down the graphic. All of the chromosomes from the sire are represented in the blue color, and all of the chromosomes from the dam are in the pink color. When that bull creates the sperm that are used to inseminate his progeny and create the progeny, those sperm are a random sampling of the chromosomes that that bull has. It can be all 30 chromosomes coming from his sire, in which case you'd have the sperm be all blue chromosomes. You could have 29 from the sire and 1 from the dam. And you go through all of those different combinations to where all 30 chromosomes may come from the dam. All told, there are over 1 billion combinations of the chromosomes that that bull carries that can be created from the sperm that he is going to be into the doses of semen. And then keep in mind, the same thing happens on the dam side in creating the egg that will create a unique combination. And so when you talk about a specific mating pair, a particular bull and a particular cow, the 1 billion times 1 billion is 1 quintillion possibilities of how those chromosomes in the parents might be coming together into the progeny. And so that creates tremendous variability if what those progeny might look like from a specific mating pair. And what happens is that genomics as a test helps us identify the variability in those progeny. I have an example use case here where there's a slide that shows an example trait of Cavingese maternal, and all of these are half-sib embryos from the same sire. And you can see in this graphic, some of the animals and the progeny out of this particular sire, some of them are in the top 2 or 3% for calving age maternal, and others are in the bottom 10%. So even though, you know, they're all half sibs, there's tremendous variability, and genomics helps understand and characterize which of those specific chromosomes and genes the specific individuals inherited from that sire. And then we go on to think about, from a producer's standpoint, they go through and they invest a lot of time and effort to use AI sires into their breeding program. They use great bulls to do that. I've created a slide here that demonstrates how you can inform animals and sort them into quartiles. Top 25%, the 50 to 75 percentile, 25 to 50%, and then the bottom 25%. And across the top of the slide, I have the individual animals identified by what their sire's quartile for genomic milk PTA is. And then on the left side, I have the individual animal's own genomic milk PTA sort identified there. And what you can see is if there was no genetic variability, the top sires would have the top own individual genomic PTAs. And in that case, all of the animals would end up residing on the diagonal. If an animal is from the sire that's in the top quartile, and then it would end up in the top quartile itself. But remember that Mendelian sampling, they don't always end up there. And so in this case, you can see that along that diagonal, that's where most animals fall, but certainly not all of them. What genomics lets us do is identify the animals that are not fitting into the expectations. And in this slide, I have in the upper right-hand corner, a smiley face. This is the animals that you really want to find with genomics. This is where the animals are in the bottom half based on their sire's PTA, but they actually won the genomic and Mendelian inheritance lottery, and they end up in the top half for their own genomic potential. And unfortunately, there's animals that lose in that lottery too. And in the lower left corner, those are the animals that you would pick based on the sire's genomic PTA if you use that as your selection criteria. But in fact, they inherited the poor versions of the genes, and they end up in the bottom half themselves. And I'll also just kind of point out here, these are the assignments and the characterization after we had identified almost 24% parentage mismatches for the sire to calf relationships. So that is also a factor that would add noise if you're basing it based on just the assumed sire's PTA in making those selection decisions. And ironically enough, it is very random. And in this case, you can see that the animals that were in the smiley face quadrant, the upper right-hand corner, we have about 14% of the animals that fall into those 4 windows of groupings that won the lottery. And then we also have the same number of animals in the lower left corner that had 14% of the animals there that lost the lottery. They were out of great bulls, but they did not inherit the good versions of the genes. So that is where genomics really adds a lot of information and insights early in that animal's life. You don't have to wait until it's grown and been developed into a Springer heifer in order to make that decision. These genetic inheritances are identified very early in that calf's life. But what you have to do is you have to have a system that assures confidence in the results and the process. And what we've found over time is that a very important part of that is having a system that allows collection of a sample for genomic testing on that individual animal, and it could be fit into a newborn protocol. It includes EID or visual tag identifier. And this tissue sampling unit that we have here, it is a way to capture a sample for the genomic testing, but it also has a barcode reader that's very easy for automation and processes to follow up and be able to know that we've tracked that sample very effectively. And then when you take that tissue sample, it creates a great opportunity to put the permanent identifier into that animal that will stick with it for the rest of its life throughout the production system. After you've collected that sample, you send it off to a genomic testing laboratory. You're going to be interested in what are the results of the animals. In our case, we present that information back to you through an email notification. And then we have a dashboard that allows you to go in, look at your animals, and sort the animals based on criteria that you want to define. You may be able to assign categories of how you plan to manage those animals for the rest of their life, whether that is putting them into a replacement string, or if they are a set that you want to sell, or whatever options meet your expectations the best. You can go in and manage that information, perform sorts, and look at comparisons across those animals. As well as we provide a tool that allows you to see a report where your animals rank relative to other animals within the Igenity dashboard system, and know whether you are tracking similar to other herds, if you are ahead in certain traits. In this case, I've put up a graphic related to net merit, but you can do this kind of a graph on a variety of traits that come back and get reported out. And, following up on that, information is very important, and producers want to be assured that what they've invested in, they're going to be able to see the information. And so I want to finalize and finish up the talk with a little bit of overview about how we've demonstrated that genomics works. In this case, we have a slide that shows the genomic quartile grouping of individual first lactation cows, but then calculated based on their performance what their mature equivalent 305-day milk yields were. And you can see in this slide, the top 25% were over 29,600 pounds in their mature equivalents, and the bottom 25% of animals were down just under 26,000 pounds. And it was a 3,800 pound difference in a 305-day lactation milk yield between the cows that are in the top quartile and the cows that are in the bottom quartile. And that's what you want to make sure, is that you're keeping the right cows to stay in your herd and produce the way that you are expecting them to do that. We extended this a little bit and went into a little bit further analysis, or a little bit different kind of analysis, and we looked at the milk yield productions on a set of cows. In this case, we corrected for non-genetic factors that would create and add noise into this analysis. So we corrected for those things like days in lactation, lactation number of the cow, things like that. But we can see here that the actual milk production, again, sorted those cows into quartiles: top quartile, second quartile, third, and fourth. And then it characterized what was the pounds of milk per day going into the milk tank for those. In this case, the first quartile and the second quartile were very similar in their levels of performance, but then you can see drop-offs in the milk performance for the third and fourth quartiles. We looked at that same kind of concept relative to the percent protein production. Top quartile has the highest percent protein. In this case, it was just over 3.4% protein. And then the second quartile dropped off, third quartile dropped off, and then the bottom quartile was just over 3.1% protein for that actual percent protein when you group those animals into those quartiles. And then we did the same thing for percent fat production, and this is the nicest, most stair-stepped graph of the three. the top quartile are not quite 4% fat. The bottom quartile are just over 3.2%. So again, grouping those animals based on their genomic potential aligned very nicely with the performance of what their milk production was on all of those cows. In summary, just want to review that we talked about how that random inheritance of the chromosomes creates variability. And that's the important part that a lot of producers may not remember or may not think about when they go through that. The sample collection needs to be efficient and trustworthy so that it can be implemented by the staff on the farm and in the field, going through and processing animals and collecting the samples in a very reliable manner. Producers have to be able to use the data, and that's where having a tool where they can go in, sort, filter, make decisions, and be able to implement that is a really key part of the information path. And then the genomics, we always want to make sure and demonstrate that it works to find the animals that produce at the level that you expect. Appreciate that and the opportunity to come and visit with this group, and we'll turn it back over to Kim for some of the other participants.
Thank you, JR. Our next presenter is David Kendall. He's the Director of Genetic Advancement with STgenetics, where he works to promote and advance genetic services and R&D developments. Prior to joining STgenetics, he was a Director of Genetic Development for Taurus Service and was the Executive Director of the Brown Swiss Cattle Breeders Association and American Milking Shorthorn Society. He's also served as a past chair of the Council of Dairy Cattle Breeding and is currently a member of the NAAB Dairy Sire Evaluation Committee and Inherited Biochemical Defects Committee, as well as the National Animal Germplasm Dairy Committee with USDA's Agriculture Research Service. David's passion for dairy genetics has taken him around the world, traveling to numerous countries, all for the purpose of helping dairy producers achieve their genetic goals. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Kim. It's a pleasure to be on here with BoviNews, and it's a great pleasure to be on the same panel with JR and Dan. JR gave a very good description about how genomics works, how it lets us see what's underneath the skin, how it lets us understand how that cow can transmit. And this is kind of a key and an important point. Historically, we've had cows that were tremendous producers, that had daughters that were completely not producers. We've had cows that were great producers whose sons produced daughters that were not great producers. That is a big advantage that genomics gives us that we really don't talk enough about, is we need the phenotypic data to create the genomic analysis. But if we can't look underneath the skin, if we can't see how the actual genomics are, what's actually contributing to that production, then we're not going to make headway as rapidly as we can. And again, I think JR did a very great job with that. So let's look a little bit further into this and developing on what JR said. Historically on farms, how did we make headway? Were we able to select our females intently? Or for most of us, what was the reality was that we actually had to keep just about every single heifer that was born on the farm so we would have enough replacements. And if you have to keep every single heifer that's born on the farm, then you're not going to make as rapid a genetic progress because you don't have that selection. Now, yes, historically, we've been able to, for the last 60 years, utilize the bulls, utilize male selection to improve our herds. And that's definitely contributed to rapid genetic improvement, but it's only half the picture. And this is where genomics, again, has this huge advantage for us because it allows us to start focusing on that female side. If we have with the genomics, as JR said, we can now see the heifers that are on the top and the heifers that are on the bottom. The cows that are on the top and the cows that are on the bottom with genomics. And again, I want to stress with those cows, sometimes that cow that's on the top for production will not be the cow that's going to actually transmit to her daughters that production for other reasons related to epigenetics, a subject we're not going to talk about today, but for other reasons, sometimes those cows will outperform their genetics and they won't transmit. So here we come with genomics. Here we come with this opportunity to look underneath the skin and look at those pieces that make the cow actually function well. And the commercial progress on farms we are now able to use, in combination with the genomics, sex semen. Historically, again, think about it. If we had the genomics for all the heifers, yeah, we could focus on which heifers we should use for, producing female replacements, but we would still have to use a lot of our heifers because we still would have that 50% female male ratio. If we had that, we're not going to make that more rapid genetic progress. With genomics now, we have that opportunity because we can choose those top animals to focus and use sex semen on to produce our replacement females. And if we use that top 25 to 50%, then those other 25 to 50%, we can do something else with. We can breed them to conventional semen. We can breed them to beef semen. It doesn't matter because we're not keeping the calves. We know we're going to keep the calves out of that top 50%. And that genetic progress through the pathway of the dams is this next huge, gigantic leap. Again, repeating a little bit of what JR said, but I think it has to be stressed. How do we make genetic gain? The first most important thing is accuracy. Historically, with pedigree information with Holsteins, we would take the sire in the dam, which was created from phenotypic analysis and genetic analysis, not only from those animals, but from all their relatives, not only their daughters, but their dams, their granddams, their maternal sisters, their paternal sisters. There was a lot of information that went into it from the phenotypic side. And that's where we tried to get as much accuracy as we could. With that, with the pedigrees, we can only get about 40%. So with a cow, with a heifer, we would have a 40% accuracy. Even with cows, once they had 2 or 3 records, the accuracy of that evaluation didn't really jump up that high. So here we come with genomics. It increases the ability to accurately predict what that animal is going to transmit. The next piece is the genetic variance. And all the genetic variance means is that difference within the population. And again, referring back to what JR said, the top 25% to the bottom 25%, going from a plus 800 net merit animal to a plus 200 net merit animal. That's a lot of difference between those 600 net merit dollar difference. And that variance on the top, that's where we're going to leap to. That's those animals on the top is what we want. And that's where we're going to focus on within the population. Let's focus up there, more accurately selecting the top end of the variance, which leads us into the selection intensity. Selection intensity, again, allows us to focus that. The genetic variance, we're selecting the variance of the standard deviation, maybe 200 net merit dollars, and at that top 800 average, we're going to have a huge wonk of improvement from that variance on the top end, and we're selecting from that top end so that intensity goes up. You put that together, it's fantastic, and then you divide it by the generation interval. How long does it take to get from one generation to the next? That's something that is really not stressed again enough with genomics. That genetic generation interval has allowed us tremendously to shrink the interval for each generation. So historically, the average between when a bull was born and his first sons were born, he was about 7 years of age. Today, we're able to cut that down to where we have bulls that are 22 months of age that actually have their first sons being born or their first daughters being born, because we can select with a greater accuracy from the genetic variance and the selection intensity, shortens that generation interval, and all that leads to a greater rate of improvement in that genetic gain, which is key and important. So again, what influences the accuracy? Genetic testing improves that because we take all the phenotypic information and then we take this big thing called the reference population. The reference population is what assigns the values to the genes. So it's saying that this little piece of the gene here will contribute 2 pounds of milk. This little piece of the gene will take away 2 pounds of milk. We take all that vast amount of information, that reference population, which is very accurate, and combine that with the information from the phenotypes, and that allows us to greatly improve that accuracy. The other really key piece is, even in well-managed farms, we find 20 to 35% of the calves are misidentified. Large-scale farms that have a lot of calves being born all at the same time in the same calving pen, we see this all the time. Or we see issues sometimes where people will write down the wrong stud code on the background. And think about this. If we don't have the accurate parental information, which we can gain now from the genomics, it gives us inaccurate information for populations so that our animal model and our phenotypic expression is actually miscalculated because we have incorrect parentage. The other thing that's extremely important is that without having correct parentage, we may not know lethal haplotypes. So yes, it's a great thing with genomics. We test for a lot of lethal haplotypes now. We test for a lot of recessives so that we know genetically that these animals, genomically, that these animals actually carry them. The pedigree correction allows us to even increase that accuracy further so that we don't have these issues where, this animal is correct, we believe, and actually isn't, and this animal actually carries a haplotype. That's bad. Just a side little piece where one area where this is really significant is if you have a calf whose dam has not been genomically tested. With genomics, we are very confident that we can tell if that dam sire was tested, who that sire was. And with that testing, then we can make a correction for not only the parentage and the pedigree, which increases the accuracy, but it also allows us to see if there's maybe a haplotype in the background that was being missed in some other fashion. It's a great tool to increase pedigree accuracy, to reduce the opportunity for bad recessives to continue on forward in the breed. And again, reinforcing this, how do we influence selection? We rank them. It doesn't matter what system you use, you rank them. There's a top animal and a bottom animal. And depending on how many females you need to replace to maintain your population in your herd, that's the percentage of the females that you use to produce your next generation. You take them from the top end of whatever you're selecting on, net merit, TPI. If you're selecting on DPR or any of your own indexes, you take those animals from the top. And that is the area that you focus on, which will allow you to make more rapid genetic gain. Now, there's another piece that's really important that genomics brings to us, and that is allowing us to make much more accurate matings. Historically, mating programs began with, we have a fat cow, we have a skinny bull, we'll breed them together to get an average animal. That was the original idea. As we move forward through time, we started to collect data on bulls, daughters, and we would look at a bull and say, okay, this bull sires deep udders, and this bull sires shallow udders. The great advantage that having a lot of data of a bull's daughters was, if you had a daughter of a bull who had a shallow udder, looking at her sire who sired deep udders, you knew there was a high probability before genomics that that animal actually was going to transmit a deep udder, even though she had a shallow udder. So including pedigree mating greatly improved the accuracy and performance of mating programs. Genomics allows us to take it to the next level, because now maybe that phenotypic heifer by the bull with the deep udders, maybe genetically she actually had a shallow udder. If we know that, then we can take that in consideration into matings. Again, going back to, and I know I'm stressing this a lot, but genomics allows us to focus on just selecting females out of the top end of our herd. If you use high purity 4M semen, you're going to make sure that you have 92 to 95% females out of that top end of your herd. That allows you to focus on the highest selection intensity, on the high accuracy, to make more genetic improvement more rapidly. And then on the bottom end of your herd, you use beef semen, the rapidly growing beef on dairy segment of the US dairy industry. That's a great advantage that genomics brings to you in mating program and mating designs. Now, ST has a program called chromosomal mating. Chromosomal mating actually takes this a step further. What chromosomal mating actually does, in contrast to all other mating programs, building on work done by Xuanyu Sun when he was at AIPL, USDA, is we look at what the actual genomic inbreeding of a calf is. Many mating programs will look and say, I don't want a calf to be above 7% or 8% inbreeding. The question that we have is, what does that actually mean? We know that inbreeding depression does have an effect and it does lower performance. But if you just look at the inbreeding, the predicted inbreeding of the calf, and the predicted transmitting ability of the dam and the sire, what does that give you? It's actually going to limit your progress. It's actually going to limit your opportunity cost, because maybe you're going to have greater performance from an animal that's slightly more inbred than if you're going to use an animal, if you're going to breed for an animal that's slightly lower inbred. You're leaving money on the table, hurting genetic progress, and actually not contributing to genetic diversity the way that you think that you're going to. And so that was the basic background for chromosomal matings. And since being launched in fall of 2018, we're over 2.3 million females mated and rapidly growing, and it's a worldwide program. I have the honor and pleasure to work in Central Asia, so we've used this program in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. It works great in the US, it works great in China, it works great in Europe, it works great all over the place, as long as we have the genomic results of the females. Because we always have the genomics of the males or the sires, we need to have the genomics of the females. That allows us again to run the program to give us an accurate estimation of inbreeding, because we account for that inbreeding in actual performance. That's what makes the program different. We look at the actual expected performance of the calf. We don't look at how she's going to transmit, we'll look at her performance. That is something, again, we could not do before genomics, without having genomically tested sires and dams and without having genomically tested calves. It's another way to look at management tools, looking at the predicted producing value. It's another tool that's being developed by many organizations, including ST and GVI, to allow producers to make better selection for improving their bottom line. It's an exciting element that's open to the entire industry. Now, another very exciting piece about genomics has been that it's allowed us to make rapid gain without necessarily having a lot of data. And the key piece for me, and one of the issues that I love to talk about, is the impact that genomics has had on fertility in the Holstein population in the US. The genomic predictions for fertility have been very accurate. They've allowed us to make leaps forward in fertility in the US dairy population, where today the US Holstein has an average calving interval of 396 days. It's right there almost with Jersey's, which is at 395. Being able to have accurate genomic predictions for daughter pregnancy rate on females and young bulls has allowed producers, has allowed the AI organizations to actually make much more rapid selection on that. From a very limited data, we've been able to take that over a whole bunch of population and make much more rapid gain. There's a lot of other exciting traits that are coming along like that. And one of those is a trait called EcoFeed that's been developed by ST. EcoFeed is a program that looks at the performance of an animal relative to the amount of feed intake. It doesn't look at how big or small the animal is. It doesn't look at how rapidly the animal is. It doesn't look at how much the animal produces per se. What it looks at is how efficient that animal is for their size, for how rapidly they grow, for how much they're producing. Looking at actual economic return from their feed efficiency. EcoFeed focuses on something called residual feed intake, which, to be honest, is a concept that is difficult for many people to gather, even within the scientific world. The basic thing, though, that it means is this. You can have two animals. You have calf A and calf B. And the calf A will save you $42 a year in feed cost over the average animal that has 100 EcoFeed, because to grow the same way that she's going to grow, she requires less feed. She's more efficient with that. Calf B with an EcoFeed of 110 can jump up to saving you $85 a year in feed costs. And think about that. If you're a large scale herd, and what's a large scale herd today? 500, 1,000, 10,000? Say you have 1,000 heifers that you're growing a year. If you have an EcoFeed value of 105 average on your heifers, you're saving $42,000 out of pocket cost a year in feed cost. EcoFeed is just one of the many, many traits that are being developed from a very sound, solid base of data collection that is allowing us to expand out, to give assigned values to help producers make greater selections for a new trait. There's over 260,000 females right now that have EcoFeed values. EcoFeed is a piece of that selection criteria that's going to allow you to improve the efficiency and the bottom line of your farms. You combine that with EcoBeef, which is another step forward, where we're taking and looking at the genomic performance, the actual phenotypic performance using the genomics from the beef on dairy calves that we are producing. So we're taking a whole of pictures together that genomics has been offering us to improve accuracy, improve the selection intensity, shorten the generation interval, improve the performance of our mating programs, allowing us to make selections for new traits like feed efficiency, and not only in dairy, but allowing us to make feed efficiency for those beef on dairy cross. Again, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share this exciting world with you today and to be on this panel with Dan and JR, two men that I respect tremendously. And have a great day, and just remember this: the best way to predict the future is to create it. You have that power with many tools, but primarily with genomics to do that. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, David. Our final presenter today is Dr. Dan Weigel. He grew up in Iowa on the family farm and graduated from Iowa State University with a bachelor's in dairy science. He received both his master's and Ph.D. from Virginia Tech, with his dissertation focusing on the prediction of genetic merit for lifetime profitability in Holsteins. Before joining the R&D group of Zoetis in 1995, Dr. Weigel served as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Guelph, working on the implementation of multiple across-country evaluations for confirmation traits of Holstein sires. Dr. Weigel's current role with Zoetis is in outcomes research, and he also remains active as a breeder of dairy cattle. Welcome, Dr. Dan.
Well, thanks, Kim, for that introduction and for inviting me to participate in this forum. It's a great way for us to spread this information, and great. The two previous speakers set me up very well, and so I'll jump right into it. So my topic today, I want to talk about a publication we had that came out last fall. Some people may not have seen it. They've been distracted for whatever reason, and so this is a great opportunity for us to get you caught up on that. Again, so that's the fancy title of this talk of this paper, but the farmer title would be, "Is dairy wellness profit dollars real money?" Again, we present it as an economic index for predicting lifetime profitability, and that's a big deal, right? Is it real? Does it really predict profitability in American legal tender, or not? Is it not quite what we thought it was? So this is a big paper for us because obviously you're talking about doing genetic improvement, as Dr. Tait and David laid out. Does it matter? Does it really make you more money? And so this is what this paper is about. So how do we do that? Again, we grab data from 5 U.S. herds who are early adopters of genomic testing. Again, we've offered this test for over 10 years now. And so these herds had tested all of their heifers born in 2011, and we wanted larger herds, so they had at least 200 heifers born that year. And we wanted them tested before December of 2012. And that's we also had some recording. We need some data. And we're only recording 3 of the health traits we offer. We offer mastitis, lameness, metritis, retained placenta, milk fever, and displaced basal emacium and ketosis. And so we need them to record at least 3 of those 6 health events for our study. And obviously we had to be on milk, fat, and protein recording. That's how cows pay the bills. Recorded all the breedings and calving data. They record when the cows left the herd and how they left the herd, whether they are alive or not. And the heifers, these were customers who were testing their heifers, right? And we know they culled the worst of them, right? So we really couldn't able to include all their heifers they tested because we weren't sure, did they cull them for health reasons, or they didn't breed, or were they a genomic cull? So we just used the heifers that actually calved in the herd. So again, data is a little biased that way, also biased quite a bit, right? Because they've removed the worst of the heifers based on the net merit they got from CDCB. And at the end of the day, we had 2,185 cows in the study. All right, so how do we calculate profit? Well, it's pretty much like you'd think, right? I mean, cows' production is income over feed cost. We account for all the calf sales. If they have a live calf or dead calf, again, that was recorded. The salvage value or not, heifer rearing cost, what was their age at calving. We had all the breeding records, so every time the heifer cow was bred, We charge them for the labor and semen and drugs that it took to do that. The disease costs, whatever the disease was, we literature values for what that cost, the labor, the meds, the lost milk, if that's the case. We have genomic costs, and of course we have other daily costs. If you're a heifer, you have different costs in a dry cow than a fresh cow. And this is kind of a big thing right here. We're also going to adjust the lifetime profitability again. So we have these cows. They're kind of a unique investment. You spend for 2 years, and then you finally start getting some returns. We debated this quite a bit, but we decided to discount those returns and those expenses back to birth. And we use an interest rate of 10.5%, which is a little bit more than I'm getting right now in my money, but that's what we used. And so we'll talk about that a little bit as we go into this. All right. So again, what these cows look like, again, so what we did for the study, just like Dr. Tait did, we like to look at quartiles. How well do we do at looking at, if I say this cow is in the bottom 25%, how well did I do and putting her in that category, and then the top 25%. So again, within each of these 5 herds, we had this dairy wellness profit dollars. Again, that's a special dairy wellness profit dollars. It was generated using only the data that was available in December of 2012, because we wanted to give producers, do this study with something that really mimicked what producers would have had when they went to breed these heifers. Again, how accurate was that information? If they were buying genomic sire, we wanted to have just the data that bull had available back in 2012. So again, we had the CDCB results in 2012, and then we generated our special Zoetis traits using only the data available in 2012. So we took the best 25% from each herd, and so we look at that chart here. We can see that they average 430 dairy wellness profit dollars. Again, this is 2 base changes ago. Again, so this is a long time ago. And then the worst group would be 3 dairy wellness profit dollars. Some of the cows were still in the herd when we finished this study for the journal article. 3% were still around. And for the purposes of the study, we just said, okay, you're culled. The day we gathered that back up from that herd, and we assigned them a cull value because they were still alive. Again, those cows would have been in their 5th or 6th lactation. And like, JR introduced this concept early on, when we're looking at cows, it's different. I mean, David talked about, we are a sire-focused industry. That's how we made our progress, is using better sires. So we talked about PTA. What will this bull's daughters do for us? If he's plus 2,000 pounds of milk, that means he's going to give a random sample of his genes to his daughters, and because of his genetic makeup, he can just give half of his genes to each daughter, and they'll give 2,000 pounds more milk than the average bull in the breed. Right, now as JR covered, if we're talking about PTAs and actual production on cows, well, we got to double those values. She uses her whole genetic makeup to express her performance, and so we got to take that $427 difference here, and we got to double it. So that's $854. That seems like a lot, and this is why this is so important for this study. Is we go out this dairy and take these samples from these calves and say, hey, this group of the top 25%, over their lifetime is going to generate $850.4 more than this bottom 25%. That's a lot. That seems like a lot of money, and it's hard for people to swallow. Even though we've done just like Dr. Tait showed, we showed each individual trait, still to see them all come together and say this is really going to be $854 on average across all these efforts seems like a lot. Let's dig down into these traits just a little bit, the component traits, and see if we can see why we can get to that number. So again, same thing, we rank the cows on the Dairy Wellness Profit Dollar Index. Again, we have milk in that index. So what happens, what do the top 25% of the cows look like for PTA milk when you rank them on Dairy Wellness Profit Dollars? And so you can see the best 25% average 563 PTA pounds of milk for back in December of 2012. And the worst 25% were at 250. So that's 313 pounds difference, 626 pounds more milk for each 305 days lactation. So again, 305 days lactation, 626 pounds, that's about 2 pounds a day more. We expect that best group to give. When we rank them on Dairy Wellness Profit Dollars, we get milk as well, and we expect about 2 pounds more milk per day. And same for fat and protein, same interpretation. Now we'll go to productive life. That's measured in months in milk. So again, the difference between the PTAs between the two groups is 2.3 months. And that means that we expect double that, or 4.6 months more time in the milking herd. Again, that's half a lactation almost, just about half a lactation. That seems far-fetched. That's hard for people to, they think about their best cow having some issues and leaving. It's hard to see, on average, they're going to have a half a lactation more. It seems like a lot. The next column I've highlighted there is livability. Again, a 1.8% difference in the PTAs between the best and the worst group. That means 3.6% fewer cows dying on the farm. It should be. Again, that's a big deal. No cull check for those cows, and that adds up. So, and nobody likes seeing a cow die on the farm, right? So, yeah, those are some of the traits that make up our index, and you see how they're weighted, and those are pretty big differences. The next slide here shows the STA differences for our dairy wellness proprietary traits for health. Again, just like David mentioned, we express these as with his eco-feed. Our scale is 100 is the average cow, and the standard deviation is 5. So again, that's you talk about type, a heifer that's 0 versus one that's 1 for stature. They're quite different, right? One standard deviation is kind of a big difference, and so you can see for our mastitis trait there, that best group is 103, and the worst 25%, they average 94. That's 9 different. That's a lot. That's almost 2 standard deviations, and you look across the bottom there, you can see right away, it's pretty clear we're putting a lot of weight on mastitis. Again, that's what our producers tell us is important, and less of the economics that we look at say mastitis is a pretty big deal. Lameness would be second, and you go down the list and you can see the differences in the traits there. Again, on the bottom, I've got a little footnote there. Across all of our studies, typically, what's 2 STAs really mean in the real world? Well, that means about half the disease. Again, so I look at that best 25% at 103 and the worst at 94. I kind of expect to see close to 50% less mastitis in that best group. So again, that's a pretty big difference, and so you can see when you talk about that kind of difference, why we put a lot of economic value on it. Half mastitis is a lot less time in the hospital pen, right? So how did it work? How did the bottom line, how does it work? Yeah, so what I've shown here is that the 2 quartiles again for the dairy wellness profit group on the bottom axis, and I've got lifetime energy corrected milk on the vertical axis. Why do I use energy corrected milk? Well, our index really selects for fat and protein, and if you look at just milk, you're going to leave a lot on the table because our index really pushes for higher fat and protein yields, and these cows are higher components cows, and so I did that correction with the equation at the bottom there, and you can see that the worst 25% are 54,000. Again, from economics, you may have seen the number that the average cow kind of needs to make 50,000 pounds of milk to break even, and so these girls are perilously close to that 50,000 pounds of milk, aren't they? So they're not real big winners on the lifetime profitability deal, probably. Look at the best 25%, 74,615 pounds, and counting. And more of those cows are still going. So that's 19,880 pounds of milk. That's a lot of milk. That's almost 2/3 of a lactation, right? Days in milk again. So again, you go back to the initial graph. I said there'd be 4.6 months longer in the herd, and you look at these results here, we've actually got 6.6 months. Now, how is that possible? How to get more than we expected, more than the PTA expected? Well, I've got a lot of traits in this index, such as mastitis and DPR and lameness. These are all traits that kind of predict how long a cow will stay in the herd. Again, so in addition to productive life, I've also got these other traits that indicate how long a cow will live in the herd. And so, this is where selection index gets really tricky. You don't even know what you're going to get when you look at the PTA sometimes because of all the other traits in the index. And so we're getting quite a bit more time in the herd than we expected between the best and the worst group. And then finally, if you do the math, the pounds of milk over the days in the herd, you can see that these cows are given 4.1 pounds more energy-corrected milk per day in milk. So again, you go back to that first chart, I told you it was going to be 2 pounds per day more over their lifetime. Well, it turns out, the USG, the CDCB, they use a heritability of 20%, and these herds are not seeing a heritability of 20%. So they're really more like a 35% heritability is what we're seeing in our herds. And so as a result, those PTAs are shrunk down too much. And so we don't really expect 2 pounds. In a well-managed herd or above managed herd, we expect 3.5, sometimes 3.5, 4 pounds more milk. Again, across these 5 herds, which were their managing ability, I kind of expected 3 pounds of milk more per day instead of 2, just because of the heritability issues. So how do I get the extra pound? Well, when I add a half a lactation to these cows, that half a lactation is, third lactation. These cows are in peak mature productivity, and so cows that are older cows give more milk, and so that's how you get more pounds per day than you expect, is because these cows are just more. Older cows give a lot more milk. All right, so you wrap all this up, and you probably have figured it out. Yeah, there's big differences in the profitability between the groups, and cows that stick around longer give more milk. Again, we haven't gone into the health costs. They actually have less health costs, more live calves, fewer services breeding. The list goes on and on of all the things we have in this index. And yeah, all up, it is really a lot of money. Again, between the two groups, $811. So here's that graph again. I promised you 854. I've only got 811. Maybe I've shortchanged you a little bit here. It's not quite working as well as I said, but I will remind you, we use a 10.5%, a 10.4% interest rate, and that's a pretty big deal. Again, so if we'd adjust that down, again, that cow who's in her 5th lactation, she's 7 years old, 7 years at 10.4%. That means that monies that cow generates in her 5th lactation are 50 cent dollars. When I discount all the way back to when she's born, which is what I've done, those are 50 cent dollars. Again, by farmer math, I don't really account for interest rate. You add it all up, that cow really, those best cows actually give $2.86 more instead of $2 more for every point of DWP. We're really seeing 2.86. And now, if we'd use a 5% discount rate, it'd be $2.3. So that discount rate is a big deal. But we couldn't do better. We can do better as well, though. So let's talk about that. So results of this work, we revised dairy wellness profit dollars this past April. And what do we do? Well, we've got some new traits. So we've got a new wellness trait and cow respiratory disease. We've got 2 fertility traits. Twin, which was one that I was really pushing for, is a big deal. I don't like twins. They're not twice the fun. And then the second one, which is actually the bigger deal, and I wasn't aware of, is abortions. Abortions have been creeping up in incidence. So we're seeing about 11% in our herds. And again, the way our index works, or any index, if something happens a lot and it costs you a lot of money, and it's really not really related to other traits in our index as much as we'd like, we're actually making going the trend on abortions, again, at 11%, it's gone up. We're not going the right way on that. That's going to get more attention in our index than twins. And so those are the 3 traits we've added to our index. Again, we also made some other revisions based on this research that we've done here. Again, I mentioned the heritability problem with production. We got to put more weight on that trait. If people are seeing half again the response, well, then that trait is more valuable than we thought it was. Body size, body weight index, composite index. The research on the feed efficiency work that's been going on, that's a big push in this country, shows that these big cows actually eat a bit more than quite a bit more than we thought they did. And so we've got to increase that negative weight on body size composite. We're actually going to double it. And then foot and leg composite and udder composite, it turns out, and we look at our research, if you're just an average cow, a U.S. Holstein today, or you're well above average, it doesn't matter. You're really good. And so we really didn't need to have those traits in there. They're all really good today. And so we can afford to take them out today because of all the progress we've made in the past. And again, just like I mentioned before, we've added abortion and twins, two traits that also contribute pretty strongly in respiratory disease that contribute to productive life. So to make our index work properly, again, we actually decrease the weight given to productive life directly because we've got these three new traits to explain a little bit more about productive life. So again, we re-ranked that, made our new index to work. So let's apply that new index to the same study we just talked about and see, does it work better? We should have made it better. Hopefully we're continuous improvement. So let's see if it does better. Well, okay, so here is again, I've got the column on the right, the index I showed you before, the $427 difference between the top and the bottom. Again, we're going to give those new traits to those old cows, calculate the new index, re-rank them, and wow. Now we've got more spread. Again, that extra production, the new traits, we're really spreading these cows out. Now we're talking about, again, $504 difference between the two groups, a cool $1,000, I'm saying, on average, between the cows groups. Oof, seems like a big stretch. We go through, do the same methods again, we're at $894. Again, using that 10.4% discount rate. And again, you're saying, well, why are you leaving me so short? $106 per cow. But again, I'm not measuring all the traits in that feed thing. I put 10% of my weight on that these cows are eating less, and we're not measuring that. So again, that's kind of out there that we know these cows are eating less and feed's a big deal. That's I think we feel pretty comfortable with where we're at with this index right today. And again, it's just it gets to be a better testing, gets to be a better deal every day, right? Again, we're really tearing into this. We're doing these genetic audits on these herds, looking at how their cows perform with all these different traits, just like Dr. Tait mentioned and showed. Again, we're looking at lifetime profitability and digging down, and again, looking at how these cows pay back their bills, their heifer costs, and you can see the bottom group there, the bottom 25%. And you look at that and you say, okay, they made 69 pounds a day on average as 2-year-olds. Again, that's hard to do to calculate because you got these cows that leave at 60 days and these sort of things. But again, as best we can come up with, the average heifer in that group made about 69 pounds a day. As a 2-year-old, she made 81 as a second lactation cow, and then she left. And it looks like we're leaving as a negative. The average cow loses money, and that's more the median cow, right? The median, not if we count the cows from the top to the bottom, look at what that mid cow did. That's what she did. She actually lost money. But again, we've got a couple of cows there that are really paying some bills. Some cows that made it to their 5th, 6th lactation, and they made a lot of money, and they helped pay for all the rest of them. But again, the average cow in that bottom 5th percentile did not make money, did not break even. She lost money. So, or you look at the best group, that's a lot better herd of cows to milk, right? The 75 pounds, 8 pounds, 9 pounds a day. Again, the more we look at this data, the more we can see. Your Zoetis rep, you may wonder why that we're pulling our hair out, why people aren't testing more. Well, this is it, right? Everything we look at says this is a tremendous return on investment. And thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to talk about this today.
Thank you, Dan. So a few questions, and I think any of you can probably tackle the first one today. Is genomics for everyone? And what criteria do producers need to meet in order to consider genomic testing?
Kim, I would say that it's for anybody who wants to make progress faster. And that could be in a commodity market, that the market's going to head towards being a break-even business. So if you want to be ahead of the competition, it makes a lot of sense to do that. And then another opportunity is anybody who has a specified market that they want to produce into with certain claims or certain attributes or certain kinds of products being created. They can identify the right cows to go into that production system so that their processor will get a lot of bang for the milk that they're producing as well. So I think just about everybody, in my opinion, could benefit from genomics testing.
Yeah, Kim, I think obviously we debate this every day. What herd should our reps target? And again, genomics is something, some people will say, well, my heifer is not good enough. I shouldn't do it today because my heifer is not good. Well, you can work on both at the same time, right? and again, the goal, the kind of the rule we've come up with, simple. I'm good at simple. Is this? Hey, just ask yourself: is this producer somebody who's going to be in business in 5 years? If they are, then they probably need to get out on this technology. It's a pretty tremendous return on investment.
Absolutely. And one of the key pieces today, again, when it comes to the cost and excess heifers and making mating decisions, you can apply these really rapidly. You have the long-term genetic gain, but you also have this opportunity to do things quickly. And that's, one of the questions that we have is, what's the first thing they should think about when they're actually going to be getting into genomic testing? And that's to figure out what you want to do. Sometimes people get excited and they get in, they want to test everything, but is that really the practical way? If you've got a whole bunch of extra heifers, focus on testing your heifers to find out who you can call. If you don't have a lot of extra heifers at the moment and you're interested in using sex semen, test your cows, because as JR and Dan have both pointed out, the reality is sometimes phenotypic expression is not exactly what that cow is going to transmit. So having a good grasp on which cows are the ones that you really should be selecting for the future, your future herd replacements, that's something that happens really quickly. And again, use the money to make calves out of those and use a lesser value semen, the beef semen, to use on the crosses. We think genomics can apply to everybody. And that applies, again, not just to people who are on test. That's one of the beauties about genomics, right? Is that we need everybody to contribute. We like them to be on test. But if they're not, the fact that they can have the resources to this huge reference population that has all this data, that is going to allow them to make selections now.
Now, and to follow up a little bit along the lines of this discussion, what is the percentage of the U.S. dairy cattle that are being genomic tested today?
Our teams have told me that it's somewhere around 15%. I don't know if other people have different perspectives around that number, but it is unfortunately disappointingly low, and we want more people to be able to take advantage of that.
So why do you think the number is so low?
I suspect my take on it would be that they've not been informed about the variability that exists. They think that the bull selection and implementation is the best path forward, and they haven't been shown the kinds of variability that we talked about in this seminar today is one part of that.
And going with that is, again, I think that we need to stress the immediate economic gain. Again, test your heifers if that's the case, so that you can call the heifers that you're not going to need because they don't meet the level of potential that JR and Dan and I are talking about. We sometimes project way too far in the future with genomics. We have to go on to these farms and say, here, today, this is a way that you can make economical return from testing today.
JR, producers can accumulate a lot of data from genomic results, and it can be overwhelming. So what advice do you have for them to manage the data to better make decisions?
That's a great question, Kim. I think that there's a couple of things, and it ties into the comments that David made a few minutes ago. Having a plan of what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. But I would recommend that they take a multi-trait selection index and come up with identifying what that looks like and where their herd is, and then start to establish some benchmarks about what they're going to do with animals at a certain level within that index metric. Is it going to be, sexed semen? Is it going to be selling them as excess heifers? A wide variety of things. You kind of have to get started into it, get a little bit of information, and then the manager can start to establish some criteria that they will actually act on. And action is a very important part of this process too.
And just to follow up with you on that, JR, what protocols or training need to be put in place to ensure sample accuracy by employees if you went through the process of gathering genomic samples?
So we have found that there is sometimes concern by farm managers that maybe the staff might not be able to collect a sample accurately and things like that. But in actuality, there are some great resources at YouTube about how to collect the tissue sampling units that I showed the demonstration on. And it is a very straightforward process that it just takes a few animals of experience and practice to get that well established. But then having it be part of the routine process that sample gets collected on every animal, people don't have to think, do I do this on this animal or not on that animal? It just becomes part of the practices of the farm. Those are the big implementation hurdles.
Perfect. Dan, if a producer is selecting for something like dairy wellness profit dollars, what impact does management have on the expression of the component traits?
That's a great question. So we spend an enormous amount of time and resources on that very issue. We really like to have an annual meeting with our producers and go over the results and step through each of the traits. And again, we've got a continually evolving our system. And now we're looking at lifetime profitability for those producers. Every day we have more and more producers who have been testing long enough that we can start looking at lifetime profitability and see what traits were really the bottleneck that held cows back. Again, all the data we look at, mass size is a big deal. I mean, producers just don't like treating cows very often. I tell people they use our product called Pursue, which is perlomycin. They might use another product, but then they reach for the trailer mycin. They put those cows in a trailer and they haul them away. So again, it's a pretty big deal. Everything we look at, but again, this is a big part of our approach as we sit down with those producers, hopefully at least once a year, maybe twice a year, and look at how traits are performing. With milk, the better the environment, the bigger the differences. That's what we see. The heritability is higher. If you tell me you're a 30,000 pound herd, I can tell you pretty much what your heritability is. With the health traits, it's actually the opposite. And repro, if you have a kind of a stressed environment, you'll see bigger genetic differences. Whereas you don't have a stressed environment, you won't see as big a differences. And again, a long time ago when we launched this, one of our team was from South Africa. Those people are they're from the bottom of the world. They look at things different. They're kind of a pain to have around. But he said to me, "Hey, Dan, will we ever go to a producer and say this? You got problems with your management based on the genomic test?" I looked at him and said, "No, Gavin, it's not going to work that good. We'll kind of give them in the right buckets, but we're not going to be able to do anything like that." And that's exactly what we're doing today. And I mean, I remember a meeting 4 years ago, a producer came in and we had their metritis graph, and we said, "Wow, your best heifers are having 20% metritis. That's, that should be the average, right?" And a year later, we met with them. They have their metritis, right? They said, "Yeah, we had the nutrition worked on, the transition facilities. We halved our metritis rate. Whole group went down where it should be. Beyond what, better than average." So again, cost yourselves a lot of good exceed sales that day, but it's the right thing to do. And we got to get better as an industry. So again, you hit the nail on the head. This is a big deal to really, I don't know why more people with multi-site operations aren't jumping on genomics, because to really, you could really compare how these different managers doing across my system. So.
And David, it seems like those who use genomics want to see progress quickly. What's the best way producers can utilize genomics to get the best results as quickly as possible? Is there a quick way?
What's that?
And is there a quick way? Well,
again, you have to figure out what you want to do. And the quickest way, again, is to sort through the heifer lots, right? To sort through, because the cost of raising a heifer that's not going to have the potential to respond in your environment, get rid of her. That's something that can save you money in a hurry. Here in the US, we have an advantage because our environmental issues aren't quite to the extent that they are in Europe. In Europe, genomic testing, particularly in the north, is extremely widespread because people want to know what the potential of that heifer is. By the time she's 35 to 40 days old, they need to make a decision because it's going to have a huge cost on them from the environmental tax for maintaining her on the farm. And truthfully, we kind of think we're all seeing that coming in this direction, right? that's a little bit in the future, but there's something immediately that you can apply that to. Here, again, just the cost of feed. We're looking at corn and soybean right now. That's just, it's the highest it's been in something like 14 years for beans, I think I heard this morning. You know, and corn's pushing up there. The cost of raising a heifer that you don't need, that's something huge. But the other piece then, the immediate thing is, again, making that decision on your older cows about who you're going to use beef semen on. You know, make those decisions. So again, you got that crossbred calf hitting the ground that you know that you can get rid of right away. And that's actually something that's been going on in Europe for a long time. You know, they've applying the genomics to it now, but they've been doing the same thing. They take the lower part of their herd, breed them to beef. With genomics, we can make that allows us to make more accurate predictions.
Well, my thanks to JR, David, and Dan for joining us today, sharing your invaluable expertise on this important tool, increasing the profitability of our dairies today. Don't forget to subscribe to the BoviNews channel on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in with us, and we'll see you next time on another edition of BoviNews.